Harold sat at the metal desk that had been his corner of the town library for the past 6 years, a desk nestled between the large print novels and the dusty filing cabinet where old card catalogs still lingered like ghosts from another time. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, and outside, the wind stirred the brittle leaves that had begun falling just a bit too early this year. He adjusted his glasses, squinted at the returns log, and felt, not for the first time, like time itself had moved on without asking for his permission. The sound of sensible shoes clicking down the aisle announced the arrival of Amanda, the young branch manager who never made eye contact unless necessary, her phone always in one hand, a cup of something herbal in the other. She hesitated before speaking, which was warning enough. "Harold, can I talk to you in the office for a moment?" He knew then. The script was always the same: budget cuts, restructuring, community priorities. He was thanked for his service. Offered a kind letter of recommendation. She used the word retire as if it were a gift. "You've been such a stable presence here, but with the new self-checkout systems and reduced hours," he heard her, but didn't. Her voice blurred into background noise, like a podcast you don't really want to listen to but can't reach the pause button. A few minutes later, Harold stood outside in the parking lot, holding a cardboard box with a few photos, a thermos, and a paperback copy of Dune he never got around to returning. The autumn wind felt sharper now. He sat in his car, a faded blue Buick that smelled faintly of pine-scented air freshener and old coffee, and stared at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. "You're not needed anymore." The words weren't Amanda's. They were his own. Spoken softly. Deliberately. He didn't drive home right away. Instead, he parked near the old railway tracks, a place where the town once hummed with movement and industry. It had been decades since the trains passed through. The rusting metal rails curved off into the trees like forgotten promises. He sat there, engine off, hands resting on the wheel. "Is this it?" he whispered. The question hung in the air, unanswered. Around him, the world continued as usual. A jogger passed by. Somewhere, a dog barked. The sun lowered slightly in the sky. He pulled out his phone, more out of habit than purpose. Scrolled through the news feed without really seeing. And then, without warning, a short video began autoplaying. A man's voice, familiar, intense, cut through the background noise. Elon Musk, mid-interview, eyes alert, voice sharp. "The biggest lie we're told is that creativity has an expiration date," Musk said. "But the people who change the world are often the ones who refuse to believe they're too late." Harold blinked. The video was only 27 seconds long. It played again. And again. The words sank in differently each time. He didn't consider himself someone particularly taken with tech billionaires or social media soundbites, but something about those words cracked the surface of his thoughts. He tucked the phone away and drove home in silence, the quote looping quietly in his mind. At the house, a modest one-story in a neighborhood that had grayed with age, Harold unlocked the door and was greeted by the smell of dust, oil, and fading wood. He hadn't redecorated since Martha passed 5 years ago. Her plants still sat in the windows, most of them plastic now, and the hallway was lined with family photos that hadn't changed in a decade. In the kitchen, the clock ticked too loudly. He placed the box on the table and stood there, unsure what to do next. He didn't make tea. Didn't turn on the radio. He walked into the garage. It smelled like motor oil and memories. The workbench was still cluttered with tools, jars of screws, and unlabeled wires. He reached for a dusty shoebox on the shelf, opened it, and pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger version of himself, maybe 30, standing beside a rough metal frame, wires snaking around a coil, a prototype of something that once lit up a small bulb without touching it. Behind him stood Martha, smiling, holding a clipboard. That was the year he almost patented the idea. Almost. But then the company he worked for collapsed. The bills piled up. And the dream was boxed up and stored away like a foolish indulgence. He stared at the photo longer than he meant to. "What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong?" he muttered, quoting the video. He didn't sleep well that night. His dreams were restless, full of gears turning and wires buzzing. He awoke before sunrise, pulled on an old hoodie, and walked out into the cool morning air. The streets were empty, save for the occasional porch light flickering on. He walked without thinking, just moving, as if trying to outpace the feeling of invisibility. By the time the sun had risen fully, he found himself outside the local community center. A flyer on the bulletin board caught his eye. Tech for seniors, learn the latest tools, apps and ideas. Thursdays at 10 a.m. He smirked. "Too little, too late," he said aloud. But his eyes lingered on the flyer. On the way back home, he bought a notebook and 3 pens. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, turned off the television, and began to sketch from memory the old design, the coil, the transmitter, the receiver. He didn't know what compelled him. Maybe it was the sting of being discarded. Maybe it was Musk's voice, echoing in his head. Maybe it was Martha's face in that photo. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about passing time. He was thinking about possibility. He didn't tell anyone. Not Tom, his son, who hadn't called in weeks. The video was only 27 seconds long. It played again. And again. The words sank in differently each time. He didn't consider himself someone particularly taken with tech billionaires or social media soundbites, but something about those words cracked the surface of his thoughts. He tucked the phone away and drove home in silence, the quote looping quietly in his mind. At the house, a modest one-story in a neighborhood that had grayed with age, Harold unlocked the door and was greeted by the smell of dust, oil, and fading wood. He hadn't redecorated since Martha passed 5 years ago. Her plants still sat in the windows, most of them plastic now, and the hallway was lined with family photos that hadn't changed in a decade. In the kitchen, the clock ticked too loudly. He placed the box on the table and stood there, unsure what to do next. He didn't make tea. Didn't turn on the radio. He walked into the garage. It smelled like motor oil and memories. The workbench was still cluttered with tools, jars of screws, and unlabeled wires. He reached for a dusty shoebox on the shelf, opened it, and pulled out a photograph. It showed a younger version of himself, maybe 30, standing beside a rough metal frame, wires snaking around a coil, a prototype of something that once lit up a small bulb without touching it. Behind him stood Martha, smiling, holding a clipboard. That was the year he almost patented the idea. Almost. But then the company he worked for collapsed. The bills piled up. And the dream was boxed up and stored away like a foolish indulgence. He stared at the photo longer than he meant to. "What if everything you believed about getting old was wrong?" he muttered, quoting the video. He didn't sleep well that night. His dreams were restless, full of gears turning and wires buzzing. He awoke before sunrise, pulled on an old hoodie, and walked out into the cool morning air. The streets were empty, save for the occasional porch light flickering on. He walked without thinking, just moving, as if trying to outpace the feeling of invisibility. By the time the sun had risen fully, he found himself outside the local community center. A flyer on the bulletin board caught his eye. Tech for seniors, learn the latest tools, apps and ideas. Thursdays at 10 a.m. He smirked. "Too little, too late," he said aloud. But his eyes lingered on the flyer. On the way back home, he bought a notebook and 3 pens. That night, he sat at the kitchen table, turned off the television, and began to sketch from memory the old design, the coil, the transmitter, the receiver. He didn't know what compelled him. Maybe it was the sting of being discarded. Maybe it was Musk's voice, echoing in his head. Maybe it was Martha's face in that photo. But for the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about passing time. He was thinking about possibility. He didn't tell anyone. Not Tom, his son, who hadn't called in weeks. Not the neighbors, who already thought he was a little strange. This was just for him. That night, before bed, he sat in his armchair and reopened the video. Musk again, same intensity. The future belongs to the stubborn. The unreasonable. The ones who ignore the odds. Harold turned off the screen and looked around at the quiet house. The air seemed different now. Not full of promise exactly, but no longer entirely empty. As he lay in bed, listening to the creaks of the house settling around him, he whispered something into the dark. Maybe I'm not done after all. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't decisive. But it was honest. And sometimes, that's where everything begins. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning sun crept through the blinds, casting pale stripes across Harold's bedroom floor, illuminating the thin film of dust that had settled on the windowsill like time itself was trying to make itself visible. He sat on the edge of his bed, elbows on knees, holding the notebook from the night before, still open to the sketch he'd drawn of the coil. The lines were shaky in places, the pencil slightly smudged, but the shape was there, as clear as the day he'd first imagined it back in 1982, sitting at a drafting table in the corner of a rented one-bedroom apartment while Martha prepared dinner behind him, humming along to some Neil Diamond song on the radio. That was when he felt most alive, most full of forward momentum, like anything was possible if he just kept showing up, kept sketching, kept believing that ideas could become real things. Now, all these years later, the idea was still here, tucked between pages and memories, waiting. He stood, stretched his aching back, and walked to the bathroom, where the mirror confronted him without mercy. Gray hair thinned at the crown, cheeks softer than they used to be, eyes ringed with the fatigue of years that piled on like wet snow. He ran water, splashed his face, and didn't bother shaving. Down the hall, the photos remained unchanged, lining the walls like frozen echoes. There was one of Tom at age 6, grinning wide with a missing front tooth, holding a toy rocket they'd built together from a kit. Another of Martha at her retirement party, wearing that green dress she always said made her feel young, lifting a glass with coworkers who had long since scattered to the wind. Harold paused at the photo of him and Martha on their wedding day, 1975, barefoot on the beach in Santa Cruz, her hair wild from the ocean breeze, his tie crooked, both of them laughing like fools. He remembered thinking then that their life would be a movie, one with a brilliant arc, full of discovery, invention, and love that never dimmed. And in many ways, it was, but somewhere after Martha's diagnosis, after the hospital visits and the home oxygen machine and the silence that followed her last breath, the reel had slowed and eventually stopped, leaving Harold in a kind of emotional static. That was 5 years ago, but sometimes it felt like 5 weeks, other times like 50 years. He walked into the kitchen, made toast without butter, and sat with it in silence. Outside, the neighbor's dog barked at something invisible. The mail truck clattered down the street. Life marched on without asking if you were ready to keep pace. He opened the garage again, flipping the light switch to cast a flickering glow over the workbench. He pulled out the shoebox from yesterday and began sorting its contents, old blueprints, broken bits of copper wire, a soldering iron with a frayed cord. Beneath it all lay a small, cloth-bound notebook labeled simply, Concepts. He opened it gently. Inside were notes and diagrams from a younger Harold, some elegant and well-organized, others scrawled in bursts of midnight inspiration. One page, dated April 12, 1983, read, "If energy can be transferred wirelessly in small systems, why not scale to power homes?" He smiled bitterly. That was the idea he'd chased for years. A kind of resonant energy device that could send electricity without wires, over short distances, clean and quiet. Back then, people laughed or dismissed it. Now, companies were racing towards similar goals, and he had become one of the many old engineers left behind by an industry that loved youth and feared nostalgia. Still, here it was, his original concept, the child of his obsession. He spent the rest of the morning carefully cleaning the bench, arranging the tools he hadn't used in years, checking to see if the soldering gun still heated up. It did, though it smelled like burning dust. He didn't try to build anything yet. Just needed to sit with the pieces, reacquaint himself with the quiet rhythm of creation. That afternoon, he opened his laptop, which booted slower than it used to, and searched wireless energy transmission. The results were staggering. Articles on Tesla's early experiments, on MIT prototypes, on startup companies claiming new breakthroughs. He clicked on a recent clip from a conference. Elon Musk was on stage, answering questions. Someone asked about the potential of wireless energy. Musk leaned forward, thoughtful. It's theoretically possible, he said, but the real challenge is scalability and safety. If someone cracked that problem in a garage somewhere, that'd be a game changer, but maybe also too powerful for most to handle responsibly. The crowd laughed, but Musk didn't. He continued, sometimes the most disruptive ideas are born outside the labs. But they also get ignored for too long because they don't fit the system. Until suddenly, they do. Harold stared at the screen. He could feel something old stirring inside him. Not ambition exactly, but a kind of urgency, like the clock had restarted. He didn't want fame. Didn't want riches. He wanted to prove that his mind still mattered. That the years hadn't erased his worth. Later, he took a walk past the school where Tom once attended. The playground was empty, swings creaking slightly in the wind. He remembered the day they presented at the science fair together, Tom beaming as they showed how magnetic fields could move a small coil without touching it. That day, they were partners, father and son, builder and believer. But somewhere along the way, the connection had frayed. Maybe after Tom went into finance. Maybe after Harold missed one too many birthdays chasing ideas that never paid off. After Martha died, they both went silent. The calls became awkward. The visits rare. Harold didn't blame him. He knew he'd withdrawn too much, buried himself in grief and guilt. But now, something tugged at him, a wish to reconnect, to show Tom that his old man hadn't just wasted time tinkering in garages and dreaming impossible dreams. That night, Harold made tea and sat with the notebook again. He opened a fresh page and titled it, Version 2.0. He listed what he remembered of the device's flaws, the limitations of the original materials, the instability of the coil's frequency range. He wrote slowly, hands a little shaky, but the knowledge was still there, buried in muscle memory and half-forgotten equations. Around midnight, he stopped. His eyes burned. His hand ached. But the spark remained. Before bed, he stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street, the soft glow of porch lights and stars above. He spoke aloud, not to anyone in particular. I used to think it was over. That I missed the chance. But maybe I was just early. In that moment, he didn't feel old. He felt unfinished. The next morning arrived cloaked in that soft, gray light that made everything feel slower, as if time itself had exhaled. Harold rose stiffly from bed, every joint offering its own protest, but the notebook on the nightstand greeted him like an old friend eager to pick up where they'd left off. He turned it over in his hands, still surprised by how natural it felt to be sketching again, as if those parts of his mind had never really gone silent, just gone dormant. He dressed in slacks and a sweater Martha had knit for him back when winters were colder and they spent Saturday mornings at the farmer's market sipping cider and laughing over overpriced squash. He looked in the mirror one last time before heading out and wondered how many people still recognized the man behind the wrinkles and sagging skin, the man who once stood at a university podium explaining electromagnetic fields to a room full of 20-year-olds who thought he was brilliant. The nursing home sat on the edge of town, tucked behind a grocery store and a dentist's office, surrounded by a parking lot that looked more like a sea of faded paint and scattered leaves than a place of welcome. He hadn't been there in months, not since the pandemic rules had finally loosened and visitors became less of a risk. Inside, The air smelled like lemon cleaner and something faintly metallic. The receptionist looked up with polite disinterest, and after a quick sign-in, Harold made his way down the long hall where names were printed on doors like labels on filing cabinets. He stopped at room 114. "Gary?" he said, tapping lightly. No answer. He pushed the door open and found Gary asleep in a recliner by the window, mouth slightly open, hands resting in his lap, a thin blanket pulled up to his chest. The television was on, muted, showing a cooking show where someone was flambeing something that looked dangerously close to igniting the set. Harold stepped in quietly, sat in the chair across from him, and studied his old friend's face. Gary had once been sharp, mischievous, full of jokes and opinions. They'd worked together back at Western Dynamics, when both still had badge access and inboxes that mattered. Now Gary's eyes opened slowly, blinking as though focusing took effort. "Hal?" he said, voice dry like paper. "Hey, buddy," Harold replied, offering a tired smile. "Figured I'd come check on you. See if you're still stealing nurses' hearts." Gary grinned faintly. "Not much heart left to steal," he said. They sat in silence for a moment, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled because the years between them had already said enough. Eventually, Harold told him about the library, how they'd let him go, how it felt like being erased. Gary nodded with understanding but didn't offer sympathy. Instead, he just muttered, "World forgets quick," which felt more like a law than an opinion. Harold hesitated, then pulled the notebook from his bag. "Remember this?" he said, opening it to the latest sketch. Gary leaned forward, squinting, recognition flickering in his gaze. "Your wireless coil," he whispered. "You still working on that old beast?" "Picked it up again," Harold said. "Figured I'd see if the world's caught up with me." Gary chuckled, a soft, raspy sound. "Or you've caught up with it." They talked for an hour, memories mixing with fragments of technical jargon, like two retired magicians remembering the tricks that used to amaze. When Harold finally stood to leave, Gary grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Don't let it rot again," he said. "We had gold once. Maybe you still do." On the drive home, those words stuck with him. "Maybe you still do." He drove through the old industrial district, past the warehouses where once upon a time, innovation had meant something real and tangible, where engineers got grease on their hands and plans were drawn in graphite on vellum, not in PowerPoint slides and quarterly reports. Most of the buildings were abandoned now, windows broken or boarded, graffiti decorating rusted roll-up doors like scars. But one caught his eye. The old Model T foundry, where he and Martha had danced during a company holiday party in 1986 under strings of yellow bulbs and an illegally rented fog machine. He parked, got out, and walked up to the chain-link fence. Through it, he could see the cracked concrete floor, the silence inside like a forgotten cathedral. He thought about how many dreams had begun and ended inside those walls. Back home, he pulled out a small box from the top shelf of his bedroom closet. Inside was a collection of items he hadn't touched in years, a wedding ring that no longer fit his knuckle, a badge from his last job, a photo of him and Tom holding a model airplane, and a business card from a venture capital firm he'd met with once in Palo Alto. The meeting hadn't gone well. The young man across the table had called his concept too idealistic, told him to come back when he had something with consumer value. "This won't light up a Christmas tree," he'd said. "It won't sell." Harold had left that meeting humiliated and took the first red-eye home. He never called them again. That night, he didn't touch the notebook. He sat in his recliner with the box on his lap, slowly sifting through each item like an archaeologist uncovering evidence of a lost civilization. He realized he had spent so many years letting the world define what success looked like that he had buried the joy of creating simply because it mattered to him. The next morning, he woke up early and returned to the garage. He cleared the bench completely, laid out fresh paper, and began diagramming a refined version of the coil. He cross-referenced online articles, relearned some of the calculations, found a forum where other aging engineers shared updates on their passion projects. He didn't post. Just read. Absorbed. Around noon, he made a list of components he needed. Nothing exotic. Copper wire, ferrite cores, capacitors. He drove to the electronics surplus store on 8th and Main, a place that had somehow outlived Best Buy and 3 Radio Shacks. Inside, it smelled like burnt plastic and solder. The shelves were disorganized, but Harold found what he needed. The cashier, a pierced and ponytailed kid no older than 20, glanced at the items and said, "Old school project?" Harold paused, then said simply, "Old dream." The kid didn't get it, but he nodded and rang him up. Back home, Harold spent the rest of the day winding wire around a plastic tube, measuring resistance, testing continuity. His hands were slower, yes, but they remembered. His eyes needed the magnifier, but the focus was there. At one point, a wire snapped, and he cursed loud enough to make the cat next door meow through the wall. But when the first low buzz of energy pulsed through the coil, a sound so subtle you almost had to feel it rather than hear it, he knew he had something. Not a breakthrough. Not a product. But a start. That night, he pulled out the photo of him and Martha at the science fair, holding their son between them. He set it beside the coil, as if to say, "I'm still trying. I haven't given up." Before bed, he did something unexpected. He opened his email and began drafting a message to Tom. It was awkward at first. He deleted it twice. But the third time, it stuck. "Hi Tom," it began. "I know we haven't talked much lately, and I know I haven't always been easy to reach. I wanted you to know that I've picked up the old project again. The coil. The one from years ago. I don't expect anything to come of it, but it's helping me feel alive again. I think I lost that for a while after your mom passed. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for that. I hope you're well. Dad." He stared at it, hand hovering over the mouse, and finally clicked send. The screen didn't explode. The world didn't shift. But something did, internally, quietly, the beginning of a bridge being rebuilt. He closed the laptop and whispered into the stillness, "I still remember the man I used to be. I think he's still in here somewhere." Harold sat in the examination room staring at the medical poster on the wall, one of those simplified cross-sections of the human heart with cheerful colors and cartoon arrows that made it look more like a plumbing diagram than a life-sustaining organ, and he could feel the old resentment creeping in, the way it always did when someone in a lab coat prepared to tell him what he could or couldn't do anymore, what activities were now too risky, what dreams too far-fetched, and what parts of his body were beginning to betray him in slow, inevitable decline. Dar. Reiner was a kind enough man, somewhere in his 40s with soft eyes and an efficient voice, and as he flipped through the results of Harold's most recent blood work and EKG, he let out the kind of sigh doctors probably practice in med school, the one that says, "I'm about to give you advice you didn't ask for but need to hear." "Harold," he began, "your numbers are holding, but we're seeing a slight uptick in blood pressure, and your knees, well, you already know what I'm going to say. I think it's time we talk about slowing things down a bit. Nothing drastic. Just, being realistic about what your body can handle." Harold nodded politely, pretending to agree, but internally, a small fire was lighting up. "What if I told you I'm building again?" he asked, and the doctor blinked, unsure whether this was a metaphor or something to be concerned about. "Building? An energy device," Harold said plainly. "It's an old project of mine. I've picked it back up. Got the prototype humming. Dar." Reiner gave a cautious smile, the kind that says this could be harmless or this could be a senior having a mental wobble, so let's keep it supportive. "That's great, Harold. Just make sure you're not overexerting yourself. It's okay to pursue hobbies, it's not a hobby," Harold cut in, his voice calm but resolute. "It's work I never finished. Work I should have finished years ago." The doctor paused, closed the folder gently, and leaned forward slightly. "I just want you to be careful. A lot of men your age push themselves too hard chasing something from the past. Sometimes it's better to focus on the present, your health, your family. Harold smiled, but not in agreement. It was the kind of smile that says, I've heard this before. He left the clinic without scheduling the next appointment, climbed into his Buick, and drove straight to the overlook by Pine Ridge Park, where the land opened up into a wide valley and the wind always felt like it had something to say. He sat on the bench where he and Martha used to picnic when Tom was a toddler, and he let the words echo in his head. Slow down. Be realistic. Focus on the present. The words weren't cruel. They weren't even wrong. But they were heavy, like a blanket draped over ambition, the kind of advice designed to keep people safe, and small. He pulled out his phone, opened the Notes app, and typed a single sentence, "Is it too late, or am I just afraid?" He stared at the words until the screen dimmed. That evening, as he soldered a new connection on the coil, he accidentally burnt the tip of his finger and cursed loud enough for the neighbor's dog to bark again, but he didn't stop. The tiny pain reminded him he was still here, still moving, still capable of making mistakes that mattered. The coil buzzed to life again, stronger now, the receiver picking up a small but steady current from 4 feet away. It wasn't much, not by modern standards, but it was consistent, and for Harold, it was a validation of something long buried. He opened his laptop and scrolled through YouTube, letting the algorithm feed him interviews and documentaries. Another clip of Elon Musk came up, an older one from a few years back, but this time Harold didn't skip it. Musk was sitting in a sparse room, jeans and a black t-shirt, hands moving animatedly as he spoke. Most people, he said, don't realize they've internalized limits set by other people. Society has a script: you go to school, you work, you retire, and then what? You sit around waiting to disappear. That's not life. That's decay with a schedule. Harold leaned in. Musk continued, when people ask if it's too late to do something, what they're really asking is, do I still have permission to matter? And the answer is, yes. But no one's going to give it to you. You've got to take it. Harold paused the video and let those words ring in the garage like a bell. Permission to matter. That night, he sat at the kitchen table and opened a fresh notebook. On the first page he wrote, "This is not a comeback. It's a continuation." The next morning, he walked into the community center, scanned the bulletin board again, and this time, he tore off the tab from the "Tech for Seniors" flyer. Inside, a dozen people were seated at folding tables while a young woman in a NASA hoodie clicked through slides on a projector screen. Her name was Maya, and she had the energy of someone who had just discovered how big the universe really was and wanted to drag everyone along with her. She spoke quickly, passionately, explaining how apps like Tinkercad and Fusion 360 could be used to model electronics and mechanical parts. "Don't worry if you've never used CAD," she said. "If you've ever sketched something on a napkin and thought, I wish I could build this, then you've already got the blueprint." After the session, Harold approached her. "You mentioned inductive power transfer during your talk. Are you familiar with resonant frequency tuning in multi-coil systems?" Maya blinked, surprised. "You're not just here for the donuts, are you?" "No," he said. "I'm here because I stopped letting people tell me I was done." She smiled wide, eyes lighting up. "Okay then, I'm listening." They talked for 20 minutes. She asked intelligent questions, took notes on her phone, and finally said, "You should start documenting your build. People online eat this stuff up. Especially when it's someone defying expectations. You've got the perfect story arc." "I'm not a story," Harold replied. "I'm a problem waiting to be solved." But that night, he did set up a blog. Called it The Late Engineer. His first post was a photo of his original notebook next to the new prototype, with the caption, "30 years ago, I buried this dream. Today, I started digging it back up." He didn't expect anyone to read it. But the next morning, it had 12 comments. Most were encouraging. One read, My dad gave up building after he retired. Wish he'd seen this. Another, subscribed. I'm 68 and just bought a 3D printer. Harold felt something shift. Not a dramatic revelation. More like a gear turning back into alignment. He wasn't trying to go viral. He wasn't trying to prove anyone wrong. He was trying to remember what it felt like to be fully awake. Later that week, he called Tom. The call went to voicemail. He hung up without leaving a message. He wasn't ready yet. But he wasn't afraid anymore. The next day, he went back to the garage and kept building. The garage had started to smell like electricity again, that faint metallic scent that came from wires heating up, tools being used, circuits flowing with possibility, and Harold stood over his bench with the same quiet focus he used to have when Martha would peek in and tease him about disappearing into his mad scientist zone, only now there was no one to tease. No soft voice behind him offering coffee or asking when he was coming in for dinner, just the hum of the coil on the table and the scratch of pencil against paper as he adjusted a few last-minute calculations, tweaking the spacing on the inductors. Tuning the receiver's resonance range by half a decimal, because he remembered now exactly where it had gone wrong all those years ago, and it wasn't the concept or the math, it was him, it was fear, the heavy, invisible kind that told him it wasn't worth finishing something no one wanted to believe in, the kind that whispers, why bother, when the world only wants finished products and not the fragile, unfinished blueprints of what could be. Back then, the invention had taken over his thoughts like a fever, and he'd spent hours hunched over that same table, using borrowed parts, salvaged wire, and a soldering iron he'd rescued from a trash bin at the plant, sketching late into the night while Martha slept alone more nights than she deserved, and when he finally got it to work, to transfer power wirelessly, even just a small stream of voltage across a few feet. It had felt like lightning in his hands, not because it was flashy or market-ready, but because it was proof, undeniable proof, that his mind still had teeth, still had reach, still had fire. But when he'd brought the prototype to his manager, a man named Dwyer with a tie too tight and a handshake too soft, the reaction wasn't excitement or curiosity, it was annoyance, caution, a warning that this kind of project wasn't in his job description, and the legal department would have questions, and anyway the company wasn't in the business of chasing science fiction, and if he wanted to play with fantasy tech, maybe he should do it on his own time, and make sure not to bring any liability with him when he left. So Harold packed it all away, notes, coils, dreams, and went back to doing the kind of work that earned paychecks but starved the soul, the kind that made you efficient, compliant, and forgettable, and as the years passed, the invention faded into the background, just one more unfinished symphony in a lifetime of quiet sacrifice. But now, in this second act he hadn't asked for but had somehow been gifted, he was resurrecting it piece by piece, and with each adjustment, each small success, he could feel a younger version of himself sitting beside him, not as a ghost but as a co-pilot, whispering don't stop, not this time, don't let it rot again. On the table sat two prototypes, the original one, crusted with age, the copper dulled and the components yellowed, and the new one, sleek and simple, made with modern tools and better precision, and Harold studied them both like an artist comparing sketches across decades, seeing what had changed in his hand, his eye, his soul. He began documenting the tests, filming short videos, explaining what he was doing in plain language, not because he needed an audience, but because there was something sacred in saying it out loud, something brave in sharing what most men his age have been taught to hide, curiosity, vulnerability, the ache of unfinished dreams. He uploaded the clips to the blog and started calling the project DM83, a nod to Elon Musk and the year 1983 when the idea was born, and while the views were modest, the comments came from everywhere: retired electricians in Nebraska, physics teachers in Ohio, a woman in Arizona who said her husband used to build ham radios in the garage before Alzheimer's took the part of him that could remember why. One comment read simply, "I'm 72. I thought I was done dreaming. This made me cry. Thank you." Harold read it 3 times, then turned off the screen and just sat there, heart full and quiet. A week later, Maya from the tech class messaged him asking if he'd be willing to speak at the community college's senior innovation night, a small event, she said, just some students and a few folks from town, nothing fancy, but they'd love to hear about the project. At first he almost said no. The idea of standing in front of a crowd, even a small one, made his throat tighten, but then he remembered the coil, the humming pulse, the fire that had come back to life, and he typed back, "I'll be there." He wore a navy blazer that hadn't seen daylight since Martha's funeral, pressed a white shirt that still smelled faintly of cedar from the closet, and arrived early, clutching the prototype in a padded case like it was a fragile organ he'd grown himself. The room was small, maybe 30 chairs, a projector screen, a few folding tables with 3D printed models and robotics kits. Maya greeted him with a grin and a clipboard. "You're the headliner," she said, and he chuckled nervously. When it was his turn, he stood behind the podium, cleared his throat, and looked out at the room. Some students. Some seniors. A few parents. A cameraman from the local access channel. "I was told I have 10 minutes, he said. "I'm going to use 5. Because the story I'm telling isn't about me. It's about you. Or at least the parts of you that are still dreaming quietly in the corners of your mind." He held up the prototype. "This is something I buried a long time ago. Not because it didn't work. But because I believed a lie, the lie that getting older means getting smaller. That our best ideas live in our youth. That there's a window, and if you miss it, that's it. That's the lie I believed. And I buried this invention because I thought the world had no more use for people like me. But here's the truth, I didn't need the world's permission. I needed my own." The room was quiet. No coughs. No shifting in chairs. Just listening. He continued. "This is a coil. It sends power wirelessly. It's not revolutionary. Not yet. But it's proof that I still matter. That what I thought was the end of something might actually be the beginning of something else. And if you've buried something too, a dream, an invention, a version of yourself, maybe it's time to dig it back up. Not because the world will reward you. But because you're not done." He stepped back. The applause was polite at first, then strong. Afterward, people came up to ask questions. A young man named Carlos wanted to know about tuning the impedance. An older woman in a red scarf told him her late husband had once written software for NASA and never got credit. Maya hugged him as he packed up. "That was real," she said. People felt that. He drove home under a sky so full of stars it looked like a map of all the lives he hadn't lived, and he realized he wasn't afraid anymore, not of failure, not of being forgotten, not of time. Because for the first time in years, he wasn't running from the invention he'd buried. He was building it. And it was building him right back. It started with a single share. A teenager in Oregon, who had stumbled onto Harold's blog while researching magnetic fields for a school project, reposted one of his build videos with the caption, "This 80-year-old just made wireless energy work in his garage and no one's talking about it." Then came a Reddit thread, a TikTok clip spliced with footage of Elon Musk talking about decentralized energy, and before Harold even knew it, the quiet corner of the internet where he had quietly rebuilt his invention was lit up like a fuse line catching flame. By the time Harold checked his blog the next morning, there were over 12,000 new visitors. The video, just a simple clip of his prototype powering a light bulb wirelessly, had gone viral. Not flashy, not edited with music or jump cuts. Just him, his garage, and a quiet voice explaining the process. "Here's what you're seeing," he'd said. "Resonant inductive coupling. 2 tuned coils sharing energy over distance. Nothing new in theory. But practical applications? We've only scratched the surface." Somehow that humility struck a chord. The comments flooded in. "This is what science looks like. My grandpa gave up building when he retired, wish he could see this. Why isn't this man working with Musk? Somebody fund this legend." Harold sat in the garage, blinking at the screen, fingers hovering over the keyboard, unsure of what to do next. It felt surreal, like some alternate timeline had cracked open and he'd stepped through by accident. The blog's inbox was full. Engineers. Journalists. Investors. One email subject line simply read, "We want to talk, SpaceX affiliate." For a moment he thought it was a prank. But then he read the message. Polite. Professional. From a team in Austin working on distributed energy systems who had come across his project and wanted to connect for a short Zoom call. "We're fascinated by your approach," it said. "And Elon would love your story." That last line stopped him cold. Elon would love your story. Harold stared at it so long the screen dimmed and went black. Could it really be happening? Could the man whose voice had pushed him out of that deep fog of self-doubt actually know he existed now? The man who had once said, "Don't wait for permission. Build what the world needs, even if the world doesn't know it yet." Harold closed the laptop and just sat there. The coil hummed beside him, quiet but insistent. A reminder that this wasn't a dream. It was the result of him saying yes. Again and again, to something he used to believe was behind him. Later that afternoon, he cleaned up the garage. Not because he expected cameras or company, but because for the first time in a long time, it felt like a place where something real was happening. He swept the floor. Wiped down the workbench. Hung his old Western Dynamics ID badge on the wall, not as a tribute to who he'd been, but as a reminder of the path he'd survived. He charged his laptop and sent a simple reply to the SpaceX affiliate email, "Yes, I'd be honored to talk. Thank you for reaching out. Please let me know when." The Zoom call was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Until then, Harold kept working. He upgraded the transmitter. Started experimenting with different frequencies and configurations. Took notes with more precision. Documented everything. He wasn't chasing perfection, just clarity. Purpose. On Sunday night, he got a comment on his blog from someone claiming to be a former NASA systems engineer. "You're waking up the ghosts," it read. "Keep going. We were waiting for someone like you." On Tuesday morning, he dressed carefully. Blue shirt. Fresh shave. Combed his hair back, even though most of it was gone. He opened the Zoom link a few minutes early, hands trembling just a little. Then the screen flickered, and a man in a gray hoodie appeared. Mid-30s. Confident, friendly eyes. "Mr. Adams," the man said. "It's an honor. I'm Leo. I'm with one of the energy teams Elon spun up last year. We work on edge case prototypes. Your project lit up a bunch of our channels this week." Harold nodded slowly. "Didn't expect that," he said. Leo grinned. "No one ever does. But your documentation is clear. Your math checks out. We think you're onto something. And frankly, it's inspiring." Elon saw the clip. He sent a one-line message, "Let him build." Harold blinked. He saw it. "He did," Leo said. "And he thinks your mind hasn't even hit its peak yet. He wanted me to tell you that directly." For a moment, Harold couldn't speak. The screen blurred slightly. Not from connection issues, just from tears he hadn't expected to feel. Leo continued, "We're not here to absorb or co-opt your work. What we'd like is to support you, share some resources, maybe offer feedback, see if there's potential for collaboration. But no pressure. You keep ownership. This is your path. We just want to make sure you have what you need to finish what you started." Harold exhaled slowly. "All I ever wanted," he said, "was to know I wasn't crazy for believing in this." "You're not crazy," Leo said. "You're early. That's all." After the call, Harold stood in the center of the garage and just laughed. A deep, quiet laugh that rose from somewhere old and sacred. He looked at the coil. At the wall of sketches. At the parts still waiting to be tested. And for the first time, he saw it not as a tinkerer's corner, but as a lab. His lab. The next blog post went up that evening. He didn't mention Elon directly. Just wrote, "Sometimes the thing you build in silence starts to echo. And if you're lucky, the right people hear it." The post got shared on LinkedIn. Then on Medium. A week later, Popular Mechanics reached out for an interview. Then a podcast in Boston. Then a video call from a German research institute that had questions about his capacitor alignment. The world was watching. But Harold didn't feel pressure. He felt focus. And clarity. Every morning, he woke up with purpose again. Coffee. Journal. Build. Test. Share. Rinse. Repeat. His audience grew, but so did his conviction. He started calling the project, Project Ember, a nod to the fire he thought he'd lost, and the one that now burned with a steady, unshakable glow. Then one night, as the sky poured rain against the garage roof, he received a text from a number he didn't recognize. It read, "Hi Dad. I saw the video. I'd love to talk. Tom." Harold stared at the screen. His hands shook. He read it again. And again. The storm outside was nothing compared to the quiet storm in his chest. He typed back, "Me too. I've missed you. I'm still here." And for the first time in a long time, Harold felt whole. Not because the world was finally noticing. But because the people who mattered most were beginning to see him again. Not just as a man who had grown old. But as one who had never stopped becoming. The phone call came 3 days later, just after sunset, when the air outside had that golden warmth only August could bring and the hum of the street lamps was just starting to rise above the cicadas. Harold had spent most of the afternoon in the garage tweaking a frequency range on the receiver coil, calibrating it to better adapt to changing environmental noise. He'd made progress, minor, but measurable, and was about to heat up some leftover stew when the screen lit up. Unknown number. He didn't hesitate. "Hello." There was a breath on the line. Then a voice, hesitant but unmistakable. "Hey, Dad. It's me. It's Tom." Harold's hand tightened on the phone, as if holding it more firmly might somehow make the moment more real. He hadn't heard his son's voice in almost 7 years, not since the funeral, not since the argument that ended with slammed doors and words neither of them could take back. "Tom," Harold said, the name barely escaping his lips, hoarse from disbelief. "Yeah," Tom said, quieter now. "I saw your video. The one with the light bulb and the coil. Somebody posted it on Twitter and, it took me a second, but I realized that was you. Still in the garage. Still building." Harold sat down slowly at the kitchen table, fingers trembling slightly. "Still building," he echoed. "It's what I do." Another pause. Then Tom chuckled, the sound cracked but real. "I remember that. The smell of solder and burnt coffee. You used to come to my games smelling like that. And you used to hate it," Harold said. "Said I stunk up the bleachers." "I did hate it," Tom said. "But now, I don't know. Now it smells like home." Silence again, the kind that isn't awkward but full of weight, of history, of two people trying to step over years of silence without tripping. "I should have called you a long time ago," Tom said. "I kept telling myself I was waiting for the right moment. But I think I was just scared. Angry. Both." Harold nodded, even though Tom couldn't see it. "I wasn't easy," he said. "I let the work eat too much of me. And when your mom passed, I didn't have the right words. I didn't have any words. I should have fought harder to stay close. I should have." "You were grieving," Tom interrupted. "So was I. But I didn't know how to do it with you. I thought you were retreating. And maybe you were. But now I think you were drowning, just like me. Harold let the silence linger. Then, I never stopped wanting to fix it. I just didn't know how. Yeah, Tom said. Me too. There was a pause. Then Tom added, do you still have the blue truck? The one with the busted AC? Still in the driveway, Harold said. Still busted. Some things never change. Some things do, Harold said. I've changed, Tom. I can tell, Tom said. You sound lighter. Like there's oxygen again. There is, Harold said. The coil, it's more than a machine. It's a door. To something I thought was locked forever. Do you think I could see it? Tom asked. The prototype? Harold blinked. You want to come home? Tom hesitated. If that's okay. Of course it is, Harold said, voice cracking. Come home, son. They set the date for the following weekend. Saturday afternoon. No pressure. Just a visit. Tom would bring his daughter, Lily, Harold's granddaughter, whom he hadn't seen since she was 6. She was 13 now. A teenager. Practically a stranger. But maybe not for long. That week passed in a blur. Harold cleaned the house with the kind of focus he usually reserved for circuitry. Dusted off old photo frames. Replaced the batteries in the hallway clock. Stocked the fridge with Tom's favorite iced tea and bought a small bag of peanut M&Ms because he remembered Lily loved them, at least, she had back then. In the garage, he prepared a small demonstration. Nothing fancy. Just enough to show the essence of the project. The core. The light bulb. The quiet, invisible transfer of energy across air. Saturday came, warm and breezy, with clouds drifting like lazy ships across the sky. When the silver SUV pulled into the driveway, Harold stepped out of the garage and stood tall, heart thundering. The door opened. Tom emerged first, taller than Harold remembered, beard grayer, eyes tired but warm. Then Lily, taller too, wearing a black hoodie with stars on the sleeves, earbuds in one ear, phone in her hand. Teenager through and through. Hey, Dad, Tom said, approaching slowly. Hey, son, Harold replied. And then, without hesitation, they hugged. Not a stiff, polite hug. A real one. Long bone deep. The kind that melts years of distance in a single embrace. Lily hung back at first, watching with cautious eyes. Harold turned to her. Hi, Lily. She looked up from her phone. Hey. You've grown. That tends to happen, she said, and he laughed. Want to see something cool? Depends. Is it on TikTok? Nope. It's in the garage. She shrugged. All right. I'm listening. Inside, Harold showed them the setup, explained it in simple terms. Inductive coils. Resonance. Energy transfer without wires. Lily asked smart questions. Tom listened with quiet awe. And when Harold flipped the switch and the bulb lit up from across the table, Lily's eyes widened. That's, actually kind of awesome. You think so? Harold asked. Yeah, she said. Like magic, but real. That's what science is, he said. Real magic. They stayed for hours. Talking. Laughing. Harold showed them old photos, told stories. Tom shared updates about work, about his divorce, about how hard it had been to parent Lily through it all. She's tougher than me, Tom said. She always has been. That night, after they left, Harold sat in the garage, alone again, but not lonely. He looked at the coil, at the notes, at the future unfolding before him. And he whispered, thank you. Not to any one person. Just to the universe. To time. To whatever force had allowed him to reclaim what he thought was lost. Not just his invention. But his family. His voice. Himself. The sound of footsteps on concrete had become Harold's favorite rhythm, especially now that they didn't belong to him alone. Every Saturday for the past month, Tom and Lily had returned, pulling into the driveway with iced coffees and that familiar SUV hum, stepping into the garage like they were entering something sacred. Tom would bring his laptop, and Lily, less skeptical now, would often roll up her sleeves and dive into the circuitry with Harold, her long fingers surprisingly steady with tweezers and solder. It wasn't something Harold had ever imagined. The three of them building something together, not just an invention but a bridge across generations. The garage, once a quiet tomb of memories, now buzzed with life, with laughter, with tools being passed hand to hand, with ideas flung like frisbees across the workbench. The new version of the coil was sleeker, tighter, faster. Lily had suggested a portable housing unit using a recycled drone casing, and Tom had figured out a software overlay to monitor energy output in real time. Harold, watching them both, felt a strange, impossible joy, like he'd stumbled into the future without even realizing it. One afternoon, Lily looked up from the table and said, "You know this could power stuff in places that don't have access to clean energy, right? Like, real-world impact. If we scale it right." Harold blinked. "You think so?" "I don't think," she said. "I know. This is more than a science fair project. This is Musk level." Tom laughed. "Careful, he might cry." Harold did tear up a little, but not from sadness, just gratitude. "I used to believe this would die with me," he said quietly. "Now I think it might outlive all of us." That night, he wrote a new blog post called Legacy Through Voltage. It wasn't technical. It was personal. He wrote about Tom's first Lego kit, the one he bought when Tom was 6 and promptly stepped on 3 days later. He wrote about the garage being more than a workshop, it was a lighthouse, a place to guide something home. He posted a photo of Lily working on the new prototype and captioned it, "The future doesn't need permission to arrive. It just shows up with its sleeves rolled up." The post exploded. Thousands of shares. Dozens of emails. One from a nonprofit in Kenya asking if he'd be willing to consult on rural electrification solutions. Another from a professor at MIT requesting to feature the project in a course on disruptive technologies. And then, late one night, another message appeared in his inbox. Short. Direct. From an address that simply read, e@x.com. "What you're building matters. Most people slow down with age. You've accelerated. Keep pushing. We're all watching. Elon." Harold stared at the screen. Not a form letter. Not a PR stunt. A real message. From the man himself. Elon Musk. The man who had lit the fuse. The man whose words had pulled Harold out of the fog and pointed him back toward his purpose. He printed the email and pinned it to the wall next to the prototype, right above a faded photo of Martha holding a plate of cookies in this very garage, smiling like she knew one day all of this would mean something. Harold didn't tell Tom and Lily about the email right away. Not because he was hiding it, but because it didn't change anything. They weren't building for approval. They were building because they believed. The next phase of the project was public testing. Harold and Tom created a simple website with live data tracking from the coil's output. Lily ran the social media, posting short clips of their tests, progress updates, and occasional bloopers, like when the cat knocked over a capacitor tray and everyone screamed like it was the 4th of July. Their following tripled in 2 weeks. They started getting packages in the mail, fans sending components, custom-printed circuit boards, handwritten letters from retired engineers who said they finally felt seen. One letter, written in careful cursive, read, "You make me believe again. I'm 84. I thought I was just waiting to be forgotten. Now I'm back in my garage, building again. Thank you." Harold folded that letter and placed it inside his old notebook, the same one from 1983. His prototype log was now a relic and a roadmap. He flipped through its pages at night, remembering every scribble, every failure, every moment when he almost gave up. Now, it was a living document. On the sixth Saturday, Tom arrived with something new, a proposal. "Hear me out," he said, unfolding a printed packet. "A public demo. Something real. Community center, maybe the school auditorium. We show the prototype live. We tell the story. Me, you, Lily. All of us. On stage." Harold raised an eyebrow. "You want to go public?" "We already are," Tom said. "But this would make it real, face to face. Plus, there's a chance some people from Tesla could attend. Maya's got contacts now. She's been quietly spreading the word." Harold sat back. The thought of standing on a stage, live, with people watching in real time, it terrified him. But also, it excited him in a way he hadn't felt since he was a young man pitching his first design to the board at Western Dynamics. "Okay," he said slowly. "Let's do it." The prep took 3 weeks. They built a sturdier demo unit, with redundant systems and clear indicators. Lily designed the graphics. Tom wrote the script. Harold practiced his part every night, speaking into a mirror, trying to find the right tone, not polished, not rehearsed. Just honest. The day of the event arrived under a soft, gray sky. Dozens of folding chairs. A makeshift stage. A large projector screen displaying Project Ember, reigniting possibility. People filed in. Students. Journalists. A few folks in clean-cut suits who didn't say much but took a lot of notes. When Harold stepped up to the microphone, cane in one hand, coil under a spotlight beside him, the room fell quiet. He took a breath. Then began. "I started this project over 40 years ago. Not because I wanted to be famous. Not because anyone asked me to. But because something inside me refused to go quiet. And for a long time, I did let it go quiet. I buried it. I told myself I was too old. Too late. Too forgotten. But then I heard a voice, Elon Musk, saying something I couldn't ignore. Don't wait for permission to matter. That changed everything." He paused. Looked at Tom. At Lily. Then back at the audience. "This isn't about a light bulb. It's not about wireless power. It's about waking up. About building something when the world thinks you're done. About proving to yourself that you never were." He stepped back. Tom activated the prototype. The light bulb, hovering across the table, flickered to life. Bright. Clean. Unwired. The audience erupted in applause. Some stood. A few wiped tears. And in the front row, one of the clean-cut men leaned forward, whispered something into his phone, and nodded. After the event, someone handed Harold a business card embossed in silver, Tesla Labs, Emerging Technology Team. A note on the back, "Let's talk." That night, back in the garage, Harold took down the email from Elon. Not to hide it, but because it had served its purpose. The future wasn't something he had to chase anymore. It was something he was building, one wire, one spark, one moment at a time. Harold stood outside the gleaming glass doors of Tesla Labs, heart pounding in a way that felt both familiar and foreign. The building was a monolith of innovation, its sleek modern design a stark contrast to the faded brick of his old neighborhood garage. He adjusted his jacket, feeling the weight of the invitation like a challenge and a promise wrapped into one. Inside, the air smelled of polished metal and freshly brewed coffee, a scent that made Harold's chest tighten with anticipation. A young woman with a headset greeted him with a warm smile and led him through hallways lined with digital screens displaying satellites orbiting Mars and robots assembling cars with fluid precision. Harold tried to keep his step steady, reminded suddenly of the years he spent tinkering alone, invisible, forgotten, beneath fluorescent bulbs that never quite captured the fire in his eyes. Then, they entered the heart of the lab, a large open space buzzing with engineers and scientists huddled over holographic displays and whirring machinery. Elon Musk was there, unmistakable in his casual shirt and sharp gaze, moving from station to station with his characteristic intensity. When Elon stopped in front of Harold, there was no pretense. Just recognition. "Harold," Elon said, extending his hand. "You're the reason we started following that wireless coil project. Impressive work." Harold shook his hand, feeling the warmth of a man who believed not just in technology, but in second chances. "Thank you, Mr. Musk. I'm just trying to prove it's never too late." Elon smiled. "Exactly. Age is the ultimate arbitrary limitation. It's fear masquerading as fact. What you're building could change how energy is distributed worldwide." Harold nodded, absorbing the gravity of the moment. They walked to a large table where engineers had been developing a new prototype based on Harold's original design but supercharged with Tesla's technology. "We want you to lead the next phase," Elon said. "Collaborate with our team. Help us test it in real-world conditions." Harold swallowed hard, the enormity of the offer sinking in. "I'm ready," he said, voice steady but filled with emotion. The following weeks were a whirlwind. Harold found himself surrounded by brilliant minds who treated him not as a relic but as a leader. Meetings blended with hands-on sessions in the lab where ideas flowed like electricity through every wire they soldered. Tom and Lily visited often, their eyes wide with amazement as they watched Harold navigate this world of cutting-edge tech with the confidence of a man reclaiming his rightful place. Yet, the transition wasn't without its struggles. Harold wrestled with feelings of imposter syndrome, battling the voice inside that whispered, "Who are you to be here?" But then he remembered Elon's words, "Don't wait for permission to matter." That mantra became his armor. One evening, as the team prepared for a live demonstration of the new wireless power module in a remote rural village, Harold felt a pang of homesickness. He thought about Martha and the kitchen where she'd hum softly, the way Tom had once fallen asleep on the couch during his high school football games, and Lily's shy smile the first time she'd soldered a circuit with him. This project wasn't just about science, it was about family, legacy, and redemption. The day of the demo arrived under a crisp blue sky. The village was nestled between rolling hills and winding dirt roads, a place where electricity was scarce and hope even scarcer. Harold watched as children gathered around, eyes curious and bright, their faces illuminated not just by the sun but by the promise of something new. Elon joined them, standing beside Harold as the power module hummed to life, transmitting energy wirelessly to a cluster of LED lights, small fans, and a water pump. The crowd gasped, then erupted into applause. "This is just the beginning," Harold told them, his voice carrying over the cheers. "Energy should never be a privilege, it's a right." Back at Tesla Labs, the project gained momentum. Investors showed interest. Media outlets clamored for interviews. Harold's story, from a forgotten engineer battling loneliness to a trailblazer shaping the future, captured hearts nationwide. Yet, amidst the success, Harold remained grounded. He still woke up early to walk in his old neighborhood, savoring the smell of rain on pavement and the chatter of neighbors he'd known for decades. One afternoon, while walking through the park, he spotted a group of older adults gathered around a bench, their faces etched with fatigue and resignation. He approached them slowly and struck up a conversation about the coil, about reinvention, about refusing to let age define their worth. Weeks later, Harold helped launch a community workshop called Wired for Life, teaching seniors how to use technology to reconnect and rebuild purpose. Watching their faces light up as they discovered new skills reminded Harold of his own journey, the quiet revolution sparked by a single, fearless voice from Silicon Valley. On a rainy night, alone in his apartment, Harold reflected on the road he traveled. The coils, the garage, the phone call with Tom, Elon's email, the lab, all threads woven into a tapestry of resilience. He realized that what he'd built wasn't just a device. It was proof that transformation is possible at any age. That hope is not a luxury but a necessity. That the future belongs not to the young alone, but to anyone willing to dare. He picked up his phone and sent a text to Tom, "Thank you for coming back. This is only the beginning." Outside, the city lights flickered like stars caught in the night, each one a beacon for those still searching for their spark. And Harold smiled, knowing that he'd found his, finally. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Harold sat quietly in the small coffee shop on Main Street, the soft murmur of conversation around him a comforting backdrop to the storm swirling inside his mind. The worn leather chair beneath him creaked slightly as he shifted, his gaze fixed on the steaming cup of black coffee in front of him. Outside, rain tapped steadily against the window, blurring the edges of the world, much like the uncertainty clouding his thoughts. He had always believed that when opportunity knocked, the answer was to open the door wide and step through without hesitation. Yet, here he was, caught at a crossroads he hadn't anticipated, the weight of decades pressing down on every choice. The invitation from Tesla to lead a major initiative was thrilling, but it came with sacrifices, time away from home, the pressure of public scrutiny, the risk of failure on a global stage. His phone buzzed. "Tom." He answered quickly. "Hey, Dad, you okay?" "Just thinking," Harold said, voice low. "About what's next?" "You don't have to do this alone," Tom reminded him. "Lily and we're with you." The reassurance helped, but it didn't dissolve the doubt. Later that day, Harold met with Elon at the Tesla campus. They walked through a sprawling outdoor garden, the scent of blooming jasmine filling the air. Elon's eyes were sharp, focused. "You're at a pivotal moment, Harold," Elon said. "You can stay comfortable or you can push the boundaries. What do you want your legacy to be?" Harold paused, feeling the gravity of the question. "I want to be more than just a footnote," he said. "I want to prove that change isn't reserved for the young. That it's never too late to start over." Elon nodded. "Then you're ready." But readiness didn't erase fear. In the following weeks, Harold wrestled with his role. The project demanded long hours, frequent travel, and tough decisions. He faced skeptical executives, impatient media, and his own body reminding him he wasn't 20 anymore. One evening, exhausted, he caught his reflection in a mirror, gray hair, lined face, but eyes still burning with quiet determination. He thought of Martha, of the years lost, and of Tom and Lily waiting for him to come home. Harold realized the fight wasn't just about innovation, it was about balance, about reclaiming life on his own terms. At a critical project meeting, Harold proposed a shift. Instead of chasing rapid expansion, they would focus on empowering communities to adapt the technology themselves. Some executives pushed back, arguing for scalability and profits. Harold stood firm. "Impact isn't measured in dollars alone," he said. "It's about people. Real lives." His conviction swayed the room. The team agreed to pilot community-driven programs, blending cutting-edge tech with local knowledge. Outside the corporate world, Harold's message began to resonate. He spoke at senior centers, shared his story on podcasts, and mentored retirees eager to reinvent themselves. His blog posts were no longer just about wireless power, they were about powering the human spirit. Meanwhile, his relationship with Tom and Lily deepened. They spent weekends exploring nature, rebuilding their bond one shared experience at a time. Lily taught him new apps, Harold showed her the joy of analog tinkering. One afternoon, Lily said quietly, "You're not just building inventions, Grandpa. You're building us." The word settled in Harold's heart like a warm embrace. Yet, even with progress, challenges persisted. A health scare, a warning from his doctor, reminded Harold of his limits. He faced the stark reality that time was finite. But instead of retreating, he found renewed purpose. He adjusted his schedule, prioritized rest, and embraced the support of loved ones. The crossroads had not disappeared, but the path ahead felt clearer. On the day of a major public launch in a small town that had benefited from their technology, Harold stood before a crowd that included local families, journalists, and community leaders. He spoke with a voice steady and warm. "This project started as a spark in my garage, but it's become a movement fueled by all of you. Age, distance, and doubt are not barriers, they're invitations to rise. To build forward, together." As the prototype powered lights across the town square wirelessly, cheers erupted. Harold looked toward Tom and Lily, their faces glowing with pride and hope. That night, alone in his room, Harold reflected on the journey. The crossroads hadn't been a single choice but a series of moments, each demanding courage, each teaching resilience. He realized the true invention was not the coil, but the belief that transformation was possible at any age. He picked up his journal and wrote, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again. Now, I give that permission to myself, and to all who will listen." Outside, the rain had stopped. Dawn's light spilled through the window, promising a new day, a new beginning. Harold woke early to the soft light spilling through the curtains, the gentle hum of the city just beginning to stir beyond his window. His body ached in places that age had long claimed, but his mind was alive with a restless energy that refused to be tamed. The news was buzzing with stories about Project Ember's recent successes, remote villages gaining power, communities coming to life after decades of darkness. Yet what stirred Harold most was not the headlines or the accolades, but the messages flooding his inbox. Letters and emails from strangers he'd never met, stories of renewed hope and reclaimed purpose. One came from a man named George in rural Alabama, who wrote, "After watching your project's demo, I rebuilt my old workshop and started making things again. I'm 72. I thought it was too late for me, but you showed me otherwise." Harold read the words slowly, letting them soak in. This was the ripple effect, the echo of his own journey reaching farther than he ever imagined. Outside, the sun rose higher, warming the streets as Harold prepared to speak at a community event honoring innovation and resilience. The auditorium was packed with faces, young and old, hopeful and wary, all drawn by the promise of change. As Harold stepped onto the stage, memories flooded him, the lonely nights in his garage, the whispered doubts, the email from Elon that had lit a fire inside. He began, voice steady, "I stand here not just as an inventor, but as someone who found himself lost and then found again. Age is not a cage, it's a chapter, and every chapter holds the power to redefine the story." The crowd responded with applause, some wiping tears, others nodding as if hearing a long-lost truth. After his speech, Harold mingled, meeting people who shared their own struggles with feeling forgotten or sidelined by time. A woman named Diane told him about her late start in painting, how Harold's story inspired her to hold her first gallery showing at 68. A retired teacher named Sam described how he began tutoring local kids, using technology Harold's project had made accessible. These encounters planted seeds in Harold's heart, a garden of lives transformed, intertwined by a shared refusal to fade away quietly. Back at the Tesla lab, the project entered a new phase. Harold and the team worked on refining the technology to make it more affordable and user-friendly. He collaborated closely with engineers and community organizers, ensuring the human element remained at the forefront. One afternoon, Elon called Harold into his office. The room overlooked the sprawling campus, sunlight filtering through floor-to-ceiling windows. "You've created more than just a device, Harold," Elon said. "You've created a movement. The real power lies in the people you've touched." Harold smiled, feeling both humbled and invigorated. "It's about giving people a chance to reclaim their lives," he replied. "To know that change is possible no matter where you start." News outlets began featuring stories about Harold, not just as a scientist, but as a symbol of hope for older adults everywhere. Invitations to speak and collaborate poured in from universities, nonprofits, and even government agencies. Yet Harold remained grounded, often retreating to his neighborhood for quiet walks and visits to the community workshop he helped launch. There, seniors gathered, learning, creating, sharing stories. One afternoon, a young woman named Maya approached him with a hesitant smile. "Your story changed my grandmother's life," she said. "She's building a solar-powered garden now." "Thank you." Harold felt a warmth spread through his chest, the kind that only genuine connection could bring. The echoes of his impact were becoming a chorus, a collective anthem of resilience and reinvention. As months passed, Harold found himself reflecting on the nature of legacy. It wasn't in trophies or headlines, but in these ripples, quiet transformations that built up to something greater. He wrote in his journal, "We are all architects of hope, no matter our age. The choices we make today echo through the lives of others in ways we may never fully see." One evening, as he sat by the fireplace in his modest home, Harold received a call from Tom. "Dad, the foundation wants to start a program inspired by your work, helping seniors lead community innovation projects." Harold's voice cracked with emotion. "That's the best news I've heard all year." The call ended, and Harold looked around the room filled with keepsakes from a lifetime, the faded photos, the notebooks filled with diagrams, the worn tools. They were markers of a journey that had seemed impossible but had blossomed into purpose. He closed his eyes, feeling a profound peace. The echoes of his impact were not just out there in the world, but within himself, a testament to a life reclaimed, a legacy rewritten. Outside, the night sky stretched endlessly, stars shimmering like the sparks of countless possibilities yet to come. The morning light filtered weakly through Harold's bedroom window, casting long, pale shadows across the floor. Despite the steady hum of progress around him, a quiet tension gnawed at his chest, an invisible weight that no amount of success could fully lift. He sat on the edge of his bed, fingers tracing the worn fabric of an old photo album resting on his lap. The faces staring back were younger, brighter versions of himself and Martha, of Tom and Lily before life storms had carved their marks. Harold had learned to embrace hope, to build new chapters from the ashes of regret. But tonight, as the shadows lengthened, old ghosts came calling, whispers of doubt, loneliness, and the relentless passage of time. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a call from his doctor reminding him of recent test results. Harold's breath caught as he answered. "Harold, the scans show some irregularities. It's nothing urgent yet, but we need to monitor it closely." The calm voice did little to ease the knot tightening in his stomach. After hanging up, Harold stared out the window, watching the world move forward as he grappled with the uncertainty within. This was the shadow he hadn't fully acknowledged, the fragility beneath the fire. That afternoon, during a meeting with Tesla's research team, Harold found himself distracted, the room's bright screens and lively chatter clashing with the storm inside. Elon noticed, pausing beside him. "You're carrying more than just project challenges, aren't you?" Elon's tone was direct but kind. Harold nodded, sharing the news about his health quietly. Elon's eyes softened. "You've faced harder battles than this," he said. "Remember, resilience isn't about never breaking. It's about how you rise after." Those words became a lifeline. Harold realized that confronting his shadows didn't mean surrender, it meant integrating them into the story he was still writing. Over the next weeks, Harold leaned on the support around him, family, friends, and the new community he'd helped build. Tom and Lily visited more often, their presence a balm to his restless spirit. During a quiet dinner, Tom reached across the table. "Dad, we're in this together. Whatever comes, we face it as a family." Tears pricked Harold's eyes. The walls he'd built over years of solitude felt less formidable now. Yet, facing shadows also meant revisiting old wounds. One evening, alone in the workshop, Harold pulled out a letter he'd written but never sent, to Martha. He read it aloud softly, words filled with love and apology for time lost and promises unkept. The act was both painful and healing, a way to honor the past without letting it define him. Inspired, Harold began integrating mindfulness and gratitude into his daily routine, balancing the drive to innovate with moments of stillness. This shift deepened his connections, not just with others, but within himself. He found solace in nature, walking through local parks, listening to birdsong, feeling the earth steady beneath his feet. Meanwhile, the project pressed on. Challenges emerged, funding hurdles, technical glitches, skepticism from some corners of the scientific community. Harold faced criticism not just for his ideas, but sometimes for his age. Each barb tested his resolve. Yet, he met them with a calm conviction that had been forged through facing his own shadows. Innovation isn't about youth, he told a panel of doubters during a conference. It's about courage, persistence, and the willingness to learn. Slowly, minds began to open. Support grew. And the project's impact expanded. One afternoon, Harold received a message from a woman named Eleanor, a retired engineer who had been following his work. She wrote, "Your courage in facing your own challenges inspires me to face mine." They began exchanging letters, sharing stories of loss, hope, and the power of resilience. These connections became threads weaving a tapestry of shared humanity, reminding Harold that shadows were not places of exile but spaces of growth. As months passed, Harold's health remained stable but unpredictable, a constant reminder of life's fragility. Yet, each day was met with renewed purpose. He gave a moving speech at a national symposium, not just about technology, but about embracing the fullness of life, the light and the shadows. To face our fears, to confront our shadows, is the truest act of bravery, he said. It is in this courage that we find our greatest strength. That night, Harold sat by the window, watching the stars emerge one by one against the dark canvas. The shadows still lingered, but they no longer controlled him. Instead, they marked the contours of a life deeply lived, a life that dared to face the darkness and find light within. He smiled softly, knowing that the journey ahead, however uncertain, was his to claim. Harold stood at the edge of the small community center, watching as a group of seniors gathered around tables scattered with wires, circuits, and tools. The hum of conversation mixed with laughter and the occasional spark of frustration when a connection didn't quite fit. This was the heart of what he had helped build, a space where age was not a barrier but a bridge to creativity and connection. Just months ago, Harold could hardly have imagined this scene. The seeds planted through Project Ember were blossoming into something far greater than a wireless power system, they were nurturing a movement of empowerment. Martha's absence was a quiet presence in the room, her memory a steady heartbeat beneath the activity. Harold felt it keenly, the bittersweet blend of loss and legacy fueling his determination. A young volunteer approached him, carrying a small device humming softly with energy. "We finished it. The wireless charger for the community garden sensors," she said, eyes shining. Harold nodded, pride swelling in his chest. "You all have done amazing work." The ripple effect was clear, technology transforming not just homes but lives, inspiring new dreams and renewed purpose. That afternoon, Harold returned home to find a package waiting on his porch. Inside was a stack of letters from around the country, many handwritten, filled with stories of transformation sparked by his journey. One note from a woman in Ohio caught his eye. "At 67, I'm starting my own community workshop because you showed me it's never too late." Another from a man in Texas read, "Your story gave me the courage to reconnect with my estranged daughter." These echoes of impact brought tears to Harold's eyes. The loneliness he once felt had been replaced by a chorus of voices rising together in hope. The media attention intensified. National news outlets sought interviews, magazines ran feature articles. Yet Harold remained grounded, wary of letting fame overshadow the mission. He insisted on visiting the communities affected by the project, preferring the hum of real voices over the glare of studio lights. One such visit took him to a small town in the Pacific Northwest, where a local senior group had launched a pilot program using Project Ember's technology to power a mobile health clinic. The clinic brought vital services to remote areas, and the seniors themselves operated much of the equipment. Harold watched as smiles blossomed on faces weathered by time, grateful for the newfound independence and connection. That night, Harold sat with the clinic's coordinator, an energetic woman named Ruth, who shared stories of lives changed, patients who could now access care without traveling miles, volunteers discovering new skills and friendships. "It's like a second chance for all of us," Ruth said. Harold nodded, feeling the profound truth in her words. The ripple effect wasn't just about power, it was about reclaiming vitality and dignity. Back in his workshop, Harold reflected on the journey that had led him here. Each small choice, the blog post, the community meetings, the late-night calls with Elon, had contributed to this unfolding tapestry. He realized that transformation was not a solitary act but a shared dance of influence and inspiration. Late one evening, his phone rang. It was Tom. "Dad, the foundation we talked about is launching its first grants to fund senior-led innovation projects nationwide." Harold's heart swelled. "That's incredible, Tom. We're truly building something lasting. It's all because you showed us the way." The next weeks were a whirlwind of planning, speaking engagements, and hands-on mentoring. Harold found joy in guiding others to discover their own sparks of creativity. He visited workshops from coast to coast, witnessing the ripple effect grow in ways he had never dreamed. In a small town in Vermont, a group of retirees were developing a community energy garden, blending technology with sustainability. In a southern city, a former engineer was teaching coding to older adults eager to engage with the digital world. Everywhere Harold went, he saw the same glimmer in the eyes, the awakening of possibility. Yet amidst the celebration, Harold remained humble, aware of the ongoing challenges. Funding was never guaranteed, skepticism lingered, and the balance between innovation and accessibility required constant attention. But each obstacle was met with collective resolve. In a quiet moment back home, Harold penned a letter to Elon Musk, expressing gratitude and sharing the profound impact the project had made. Elon's reply was swift and thoughtful: "You've done more than I imagined, Harold. The true power lies in your spirit and the lives you've touched. Keep pushing forward." The affirmation rekindled Harold's fire. The ripple effect was no longer just an idea, it was a force gathering strength, transforming not just technology but the very way society viewed aging and purpose. One evening, as Harold walked through the neighborhood park, he noticed a group of teenagers and seniors collaborating on a community mural celebrating resilience and innovation. The mural depicted intertwined hands, light beams, and stars, a vibrant testament to connection across generations. Harold smiled, feeling the threads of his journey woven into the fabric of this new story. He knew the ripples would continue long after he was gone, carried forward by those who dared to believe in change. That night, as he sat by the fire, Harold wrote in his journal, "Every act of courage sends waves through time. We are never alone in our journeys. The legacy we leave is not just in what we create but in the lives we inspire to create." Outside, the stars twinkled. The sun spilled golden light across Harold's porch as he sipped his morning coffee, the air crisp with the promise of spring. Birds flitted among blooming dogwoods, their song a gentle reminder that life was always renewing, even when the years seemed heavy. For the first time in a long while, Harold felt something unfamiliar yet deeply welcome: pure, unburdened joy. It wasn't the fleeting happiness of achievement or applause, but a steady warmth rooted in acceptance and gratitude. After years of wrestling with regrets and fears, of facing shadows both literal and metaphorical, joy had crept quietly back into his life, woven through everyday moments. That morning, Harold decided to take a walk through the neighborhood park, a place that had become a sanctuary for reflection and connection. As he strolled, he noticed familiar faces. Seniors practicing Tai Chi, children chasing bubbles, neighbors exchanging greetings. The community was alive, vibrant, and he was part of its pulse. At the park's edge, a small group gathered around a wooden bench adorned with colorful mosaic tiles. It was the Legacy Bench, a project inspired by Harold's journey, created by local artists and volunteers to celebrate stories of resilience. He paused, tracing the patterns with his eyes, the intertwined hands, the shining stars, the symbols of hope. A young woman named Sarah approached, her eyes bright. "Mr. Turner, I just wanted to say thank you. Your story helped me rediscover my passion for painting after decades of putting it aside." Harold smiled, touched by her words. "Keep painting, Sarah. Joy grows when shared." That afternoon, Harold visited the community workshop, where a lively class was underway. Seniors learned to build simple circuits and program small devices, their laughter filling the space with warmth. He watched as Eleanor, the retired engineer he had befriended, guided a group through assembling solar-powered lanterns. The workshop was more than a place to learn, it was a crucible of connection and purpose. Harold joined the group, rolling up his sleeves to help solder wires. The feeling of creation, hands steady and focused, stirred a deep satisfaction within him. Here, joy was not just an emotion but an act, a reclaiming of agency and curiosity. Later, Harold returned home to find Tom and Lily preparing dinner. The kitchen buzzed with conversation and music, a lively contrast to the quiet that had once defined these walls. As they ate, Lily shared stories from school, her laughter filling the room like light. Harold felt the distance that had once separated them dissolve, replaced by renewed closeness. After dinner, they gathered in the living room for an old family tradition, sharing stories and memories. Harold spoke candidly about his fears and hopes, the lessons learned on this unexpected journey. Tom listened intently, his respect and love evident. "You've taught me that it's never too late to start again," he said. Harold nodded, the weight of years lifted by the simple power of connection. That night, Harold sat by the fireplace, the flames casting flickering shadows. He opened his journal and began to write, "Joy is not the absence of hardship, but the courage to find light within it. It is the laughter shared, the hands held, the dreams pursued without fear. Today, I reclaim joy, not as a destination but as a companion on this winding path." The days that followed were filled with moments both ordinary and profound. Harold took up painting, inspired by Sarah and Eleanor, his brush capturing the vibrant hues of the world he had rediscovered. He joined a book club, savoring conversations that challenged and delighted him. Walks in nature became daily rituals, grounding him in the present. Each activity was a thread in the tapestry of joy he was weaving anew. Yet, joy was not immune to challenge. News of funding cuts threatened the community workshop, stirring anxiety among the members. Harold rallied support, speaking passionately to local officials and organizing fundraisers. His determination sparked a groundswell of community backing, reminding all that joy was worth fighting for. The successful campaign was celebrated with a neighborhood gathering, a potluck dinner under strings of twinkling lights. Music, dancing, and shared stories filled the night air, a testament to resilience and hope. Harold looked around at the faces illuminated by firelight and felt a profound gratitude. Here, in the embrace of community and purpose, joy was alive and thriving. In quiet moments, Harold reflected on the journey that had led him here, the fears faced, the risks taken, the shadows embraced. He realized that joy was not a reward for success but a choice made each day, a refusal to be defined by loss or limitation. It was a radical act of defiance and love. One morning, Harold received a letter from a woman named Grace, who had started a senior art collective inspired by his story. "Thank you for showing me that creativity and joy have no expiration date," she wrote. Harold's eyes moistened as he read, feeling the ripples of joy extending beyond his own life. As spring blossomed into summer, Harold continued to live fully, embracing the present, nurturing relationships, and sharing his story with anyone willing to listen. The invention that had sparked his transformation was no longer just a project, it was a beacon lighting the way for countless others. On a sunny afternoon, Harold stood once more at the community center, surrounded by friends old and new. Together, they unveiled a mural depicting their collective journey, a vibrant celebration of resilience, connection, and joy. As applause filled the air, Harold's heart swelled with a quiet certainty, joy was not just reclaimed, it was unstoppable. That evening, As stars dotted the sky, Harold sat on his porch, the cool breeze carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. He closed his eyes, feeling the deep, steady pulse of life within and around him. "I was never too old to find joy," he whispered to the night. "I was just waiting to let it in." The journey was far from over, but in this moment, Harold knew that joy was his true invention, a legacy that no time could diminish. The first chill of autumn crept through the air as Harold moved through the familiar halls of the rehabilitation center, the scent of antiseptic mixing with faint traces of lavender from a nearby diffuser. This place was a far cry from the vibrant community centers and workshops that had come to define his recent days. Here, in the quiet hum of medical machines and whispered conversations, Harold confronted a new kind of challenge, one that tested not his mind or spirit, but his body. The diagnosis had arrived like an unexpected storm, a progressive condition slowly robbing him of mobility and strength. The words hung heavy, threatening to undo the fragile optimism he had nurtured. Yet, beneath the surface of fear and uncertainty, a deeper truth took root, a strength that had always been there, unseen but unyielding. In the therapy room, Harold met his physical therapist, Mia, a woman whose calm presence and steady encouragement became an anchor in turbulent seas. "Strength isn't just muscle," she said gently. "It's resilience, persistence, and the will to keep moving forward, no matter the odds." Harold absorbed her words, determined to meet this new battle with the same courage that had propelled his transformation. Days blurred into weeks as Harold committed himself to the grueling routines, stretching, balancing, rebuilding muscles he thought had long since betrayed him. Each small victory, a step without assistance, a grip held longer, was a testament to his unseen strength. He often recalled Elon Musk's words about pushing boundaries, redefining what was possible. Now, those words echoed not in boardrooms or labs, but within his own body's fight for survival and dignity. Family visits became lifelines. Tom and Lily brought warmth and laughter into the sterile rooms, their presence reminding Harold that he was never alone in this fight. One afternoon, Lily held his hand as he struggled with a particularly painful exercise. "You're the strongest person I know, Grandpa," she whispered. Harold squeezed her hand back, drawing strength from her belief. Outside the center, life moved on. The community continued to thrive, the ripple effect of Harold's work inspiring countless others. Yet, Harold's journey was becoming quieter, more introspective, a battle waged in small moments and private triumphs. In these times, Harold turned to writing, pouring his thoughts into journals filled with reflections on strength, vulnerability, and purpose. He wrote of the paradox that strength was often born in surrender, the courage to accept help, to rest, to ask for compassion. One evening, as the sun set in a blaze of crimson and gold, Harold received a video call from Elon Musk himself. Their conversation was candid, filled with mutual respect and shared insight. Elon acknowledged the formidable challenges ahead, yet praised Harold's indomitable spirit. "Your journey reminds us all that strength isn't always loud or visible," Elon said. "Sometimes, it's the quiet resolve to keep going when no one's watching." That call rekindled Harold's fire, motivating him to share his experience more openly. He began speaking at support groups and online forums, his vulnerability resonating deeply with others facing similar battles. Harold's message was clear: unseen strength was a force that transcended physical limitations, a reminder that the human spirit could endure and inspire even in the face of adversity. As winter settled in, Harold's condition fluctuated. Some days were marked by frustration and fatigue, others by unexpected bursts of energy and clarity. Through it all, he found solace in routines, meditation, journaling, connecting with loved ones, and in the unwavering support of his community. One snowy evening, Harold received a letter from Eleanor, the retired engineer. She wrote of a new project. Adaptive technology designed to enhance mobility and independence for seniors with physical challenges. Inspired by Harold's journey, the initiative was gaining traction nationwide. Tears welled in Harold's eyes as he realized that even in his physical decline, his impact was growing. His unseen strength was sparking innovation and hope in others. On a particularly difficult day, as he struggled to lift his arm, Harold remembered the moment he first heard Elon Musk's warning about the powerful invention. It had been a catalyst not just for technological breakthrough, but for personal awakening. Now, that awakening was expanding, shifting from external change to profound inner resilience. In the quiet of his room, Harold whispered to himself, "Strength is not what you see. It is what you carry in your heart." And with that, he resolved to keep carrying it, unseen, unshakable, and eternal. Harold sat quietly in the corner of the bustling community hall, the hum of conversation swirling around him like a distant tide. The room was filled with an unlikely mix, young entrepreneurs with bright eyes and fast ideas, and seasoned elders whose stories stretched back decades. This gathering, a bold initiative called Bridges, aimed to unite generations, to dissolve the invisible walls that often separated youth from age. Harold had been skeptical at first. How could the wisdom of decades possibly connect with the restless energy of today's youth? But tonight, as he watched a young woman named Maya passionately explain her tech startup's vision, and an octogenarian named George recount his days as a civil rights activist, Harold felt the beginning of something rare and powerful. The divide was real, between old and young, experience and innovation, tradition and disruption, but so was the yearning to bridge it. The night's theme was Shared Futures. Speakers took the stage, weaving tales of failure and triumph, of dreams deferred and rekindled. Harold listened as Maya talked about the loneliness that often shadowed success in Silicon Valley, and George shared how activism gave him purpose even when the world seemed indifferent. Then, Harold was invited to speak. Standing under the soft glow of the spotlight, he felt the familiar stir of nerves mingled with resolve. He told his story, the lost years, the spark from Elon Musk's warning, the small steps that led to transformation. But more than his own journey, Harold spoke about the power of connection across generations. "We are not so different as we think," he said. "Each of us carries hope, fear, and the desire to matter. When we listen to each other, we build bridges strong enough to carry us all forward." The applause was warm, but it was the conversations afterward that truly mattered. Harold found himself deep in dialogue with a group of young coders eager to learn about the challenges and triumphs of aging. They shared their hopes of creating technologies that could improve lives, their doubts about whether older generations would embrace change. Harold smiled, recognizing the same fears he had once held. "Change isn't easy," he said. "But it's never too late to start. Sometimes, all it takes is one spark, one conversation, to light a new path." Over the following weeks, Harold became a regular at Bridges meetings, facilitating workshops that paired seniors with tech-savvy youth. They worked side by side on projects ranging from app development to community gardens powered by renewable energy. The energy was electric, a fusion of wisdom and innovation creating something new and vital. One project in particular captured Harold's heart. A digital storytelling platform where elders could record and share their life stories, preserving memories and lessons for future generations. He partnered with a young programmer named Alex, whose enthusiasm reignited Harold's belief in the transformative power of technology and human connection. Outside the meetings, Harold noticed subtle changes in his own relationships. Tom, once distant, began to seek his father's advice on everything from business challenges to parenting. Lily shared her latest school projects with a newfound eagerness, and Harold found himself not just a mentor but a trusted friend. The walls between them, once reinforced by years of silence, were crumbling. Yet bridging divides was not without its challenges. Some in the community resisted the mingling of generations, clinging to old habits and mistrust. Harold encountered skepticism and, at times, outright dismissal. "Why bother trying to change what's been this way for so long?" a neighbor asked. Harold replied with patience and conviction, "Because every bridge built is a chance to heal, to learn, and to grow. It's never too late to connect." One chilly evening, after a particularly charged meeting, Harold found himself reflecting on the lessons learned. Bridging divides required humility, the willingness to listen without judgment, to admit ignorance, to embrace vulnerability. It was hard work, but the rewards were profound. In a quiet moment, Harold pulled out a worn notebook where he had recorded quotes and insights throughout his journey. He read aloud to himself a passage Elon Musk had shared during a keynote: "When we break barriers, whether in technology or in our hearts, we unlock the future." Harold realized that bridging the divide was not just a social mission, it was a personal transformation. It demanded breaking down his own barriers of fear and doubt, embracing change not just around him but within him. As winter settled over the town, Bridges organized a community event to celebrate their progress, a day of storytelling, music, and shared meals. Harold stood among the crowd, watching young and old dance, laugh, and collaborate. The mural from the community workshop had been updated to include images of hands reaching across gaps, symbols of unity and hope. In that moment, Harold felt the full circle of his journey, the spark ignited by a warning, the steps taken through struggle, the unseen strength uncovered, and now the bridges built. He thought of Martha, of his lost dreams and found purpose, and knew that this was the legacy worth leaving. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of purple and orange, Harold stood beside Maya and George, the new and old faces of a shared future. "We're stronger together," Maya said, her voice steady with conviction. Harold nodded, feeling a deep peace settle in his bones. "Yes," he replied softly. "Together, we are unstoppable." The crisp morning air carried a promise of change as Harold stepped onto the stage at the town's new innovation hub, a sleek building humming with energy, glass walls catching the sunrise like shards of hope. The room was packed, a vibrant mix of young visionaries, curious seniors, local officials, and eager volunteers. Today was the launch of a groundbreaking initiative, the Future Forge, a collaborative space designed to empower every generation to create, innovate, and reshape their destiny together. Harold felt a surge of emotion as he looked out at the crowd. This was no longer just a dream or a hope, it was a living reality, born from countless small acts of courage, connection, and persistence. As he began his speech, Harold's voice was steady but charged with passion. "When I first heard Elon Musk's warning about a powerful invention, I was overwhelmed by fear and doubt. But that warning became my wake-up call. It forced me to face the limits I had accepted and challenge the story I told myself about aging and purpose." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Today, we stand not in fear, but in hope. We are here to forge a future where age is not a barrier but a bridge. Where every voice, every experience, every dream matters." The applause was thunderous, but Harold knew the real work had just begun. The Future Forge was a place of endless possibility, a workshop buzzing with 3D printers, coding stations, art studios, and quiet corners for reflection and conversation. Harold wandered among the groups, marveling at the energy, the laughter, the debates, the sparks of inspiration flying like embers in a fire. He watched as Eleanor and Alex collaborated on designing assistive devices, their combined wisdom and youthful innovation producing prototypes that could change lives. Maya mentored a group of teenagers eager to learn coding, while George led a session on social activism and community organizing. In this melting pot of ideas and generations, Harold saw the future being forged, strong, inclusive, and vibrant. Amidst the excitement, Harold received a call from Tom, who shared news of a new job opportunity in the city that could finally fulfill his long-held dream. Harold's heart swelled with pride and joy, but also a tinge of sadness at the thought of distance. "It's your time," Harold told him. "Go and make it yours." Tom's voice cracked with gratitude. "I wouldn't be here without you, Dad. You showed me what it means to never give up." Later that evening, Harold sat alone in the Innovation Hub's quiet lounge, reflecting on the twists and turns of his journey. The challenges had been many, physical, emotional, relational, but each had forged a strength he never imagined he possessed. He thought about Elon Musk's relentless drive, his fearless embrace of risk and failure, and how that mindset had rippled into Harold's own life. The powerful invention Elon warned about had become a metaphor, not just for technology, but for the transformative power within each person to change their story, no matter their age or circumstance. The next morning, Harold joined a workshop focused on sustainability and community resilience. Participants brainstormed ways to integrate renewable energy solutions into their neighborhoods, blending cutting-edge science with local knowledge. Harold was drawn to the conversations about legacy, not just personal legacy, but the legacy left for future generations. He shared his thoughts. A future forged is a future shared. It's built on respect for those who came before us and hope for those who will follow. Our inventions, our choices, they echo far beyond our own lives. The group nodded, energized by the vision of a future crafted with intention and care. Over the weeks, the Future Forge became a hub of transformation. Seniors who once felt sidelined found new purpose as mentors, creators, and leaders. Young people discovered the depth of wisdom that comes from experience, learning lessons that no textbook could teach. Harold's own days were filled with moments of joy and challenge, guiding projects, sharing stories, wrestling with doubts, but always moving forward. One afternoon, Harold received an invitation to speak at a regional conference on aging and innovation. Standing before an audience that spanned the spectrum of life, Harold spoke candidly about the journey from fear to hope, from isolation to connection. He urged everyone to embrace the power of collaboration across generations. Our greatest inventions are not just machines or software, he said. They are the bridges we build, the lives we touch, and the futures we dare to imagine. Back home, Harold found himself increasingly drawn to quiet moments. He began teaching himself how to code, a challenge that frustrated and delighted him in equal measure. With Eleanor's patient guidance, he built a simple app that connected local seniors with volunteer helpers. It was imperfect, but it was a symbol, a tangible product of his journey toward empowerment and connection. As winter melted into spring, Harold received a letter from Elon Musk, handwritten and personal. Elon commended Harold's courage and impact, reminding him that true power lay not in invention alone, but in the ability to inspire others to believe in their own potential. Harold treasured the letter, tucking it safely into his journal. On a bright spring morning, Harold walked through the park, now bustling with life and possibility. Children played near the legacy bench, elders shared stories, and new friends gathered to collaborate on community projects. The invention that once threatened to be too powerful for humanity had become a beacon of hope, a catalyst for transformation, both technological and deeply human. Harold paused, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the steady beat of life around him and within him. "The future is ours to forge," he whispered, "and it is more beautiful than I ever dared imagine." With that, Harold stepped forward, ready to shape whatever came next, armed with the unseen strength, the bridges built, and the joy reclaimed. His journey was far from over, but the future, at last, was firmly in his hands. Harold stood by the window of his small study, watching the steady flow of people crossing Main Street. The town was alive with renewed energy, a mosaic of old friends and new faces, all drawn into the momentum sparked by the Future Forge. What had started as a simple idea to bridge generations had blossomed into something far greater, sending ripples through the community and beyond. Yet, for Harold, the true measure of success was not the bustling innovation hub or the accolades he'd received. It was the quiet moments, the unseen ways that his journey was touching lives in places he'd never imagined. That morning, a letter arrived, thick and official-looking, from the local school district. Harold's heart quickened as he read the invitation, to speak at the upcoming graduation ceremony. The honor felt surreal, a far cry from the days when he'd felt invisible and irrelevant. Preparing his speech, Harold reflected on the path that had led him here, from isolation and fear to connection and purpose. He knew this moment was more than personal. It was a symbol of how far the community had come together. On graduation day, Harold stepped onto the stage beneath a sky painted with late spring light. The auditorium was packed with proud families, hopeful students, and teachers who had become mentors and friends. As he began to speak, Harold's voice carried the weight and warmth of experience. "When I was your age," he said, "I believed my story was already written, that some doors were closed forever. But life has a way of surprising us, especially when we dare to step into the unknown. He spoke about failure, resilience, and the power of imagination, the very ideas Elon Musk championed. But more than technology or ambition, Harold emphasized the importance of kindness and community. Every ripple we create, he told the graduates, can grow into a wave that changes the world. You have the power to be that wave. The applause was thunderous, but the true impact came afterward. Students approached Harold, sharing their own dreams and doubts, seeking advice and encouragement. One young woman named Sarah, who had struggled with feeling lost and unheard, thanked Harold for reminding her that she mattered. That evening, as Harold sat in his favorite armchair, he realized that the ripple effect was happening everywhere, in classrooms, homes, parks, and online forums. His story, once confined to a small circle, was now inspiring countless others to take their own bold steps. In the days that followed, Harold received messages from around the country, seniors who had started learning new skills, families reconnecting, communities launching projects to empower elders and youth alike. The digital storytelling platform he helped develop was gaining traction, its archives filling with voices and memories that would otherwise be lost. Harold felt a deep gratitude for the unseen strength that had carried him through the darkest moments, now transforming into a force of collective hope. Yet, with growth came new challenges. Some questioned whether the momentum could be sustained, whether the divides between generations and ideologies could truly be bridged in a fractured world. Harold met skepticism with patience, reminding others that change was a process, one ripple at a time. He organized forums where differing perspectives could be heard, fostering dialogue rather than division. Through these efforts, the community began to heal wounds both old and new. Harold's own family experienced this healing too. Tom, now thriving in his new career, called more often, sharing his successes and struggles. Lily, inspired by her grandfather's journey, decided to pursue social work, eager to support others navigating change. Harold watched these developments with quiet pride, knowing that his legacy was not just in inventions or speeches, but in the lives touched and the hope sparked. One evening, Harold received an unexpected visitor, an old friend from his youth, James, who had drifted away years ago amid misunderstandings and silence. Their reunion was tentative at first, filled with apologies and stories of lost time. But as they talked, Harold realized that the ripples of connection could mend even the deepest divides. Together, they revisited memories and dreams, rekindling a friendship that felt like a gift from the past. Inspired by this reunion, Harold proposed a new project at the Future Forge, a mentorship program pairing seniors and young people to share not just skills, but stories, healing, and wisdom. The idea was embraced enthusiastically, breathing new life into the community's mission. As spring blossomed into summer, Harold found himself walking through the park where the legacy bench stood, a symbol of hope and continuity. Children played nearby, elders shared stories, and neighbors exchanged smiles. The ripples he had helped create were now waves of transformation, touching every corner of the town. Harold paused to watch a small group gathered around a young woman sharing her life story on the digital platform. Her words were raw and hopeful, a testament to the enduring power of human connection. In that moment, Harold understood that the ripple effect was infinite, each act of courage, kindness, and creativity spreading far beyond what any one person could see. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the landscape, Harold whispered a quiet thanks, to Elon Musk, whose warning had sparked the fire, to his family and friends, whose love had sustained him, and to the community that had become a living testament to hope. The powerful invention once feared had become a beacon of possibility, not just in technology, but in the hearts of people united by shared purpose. Harold smiled, feeling the steady beat of life within and around him. The ripple effect was real, and its journey had only just begun. Harold awoke to the soft tapping of rain against his window, the gray morning mirroring the turmoil stirring inside him. The Future Forge had grown beyond anything he'd imagined, a beacon of hope and collaboration, yet with its growth came the weight of responsibility and doubt. A new threat had surfaced, a powerful tech corporation had announced plans to launch an AI-driven system that threatened to undermine the very human connections Harold and his community had fought so hard to build. The invention Elon Musk once warned might be too powerful for humanity was now on the doorstep, promising efficiency but risking empathy. Harold felt the old fears creeping back, the ones that had haunted him during his darkest days. Was this the moment when everything unraveled? Could decades of progress be undone by a cold, indifferent technology? But this time, he refused to give in to despair. Drawing on the courage he'd nurtured, Harold convened a town meeting at the forge, inviting residents, experts, and critics alike to confront the challenge together. The room buzzed with tension and determination. Harold's voice rang clear as he addressed the crowd, "We stand at a crossroads. The future is being shaped by forces beyond our control, but that doesn't mean we have no power. We must be the guardians of humanity, of connection, empathy, and meaning." Skeptics questioned whether the community could influence a global corporation, but Harold reminded them of their journey, from isolation to empowerment, and that every ripple had the potential to become a wave. Together, they crafted a plan, a grassroots campaign to raise awareness, collaborate with ethical technologists, and create alternative tools that prioritized human values. Harold partnered with Maya and Alex to develop an AI platform designed not to replace, but to amplify human connection, focusing on support for seniors, education, and community building. The work was grueling, filled with setbacks and moments of frustration. Harold wrestled with self-doubt, physical exhaustion, and the pain of knowing that time was not on his side. Yet, the faces of the young and old who believed in the mission kept him moving forward. Late one night, while poring over lines of code and strategy, Harold received a call from Tom. His voice was urgent yet steady, "Dad, I'm here. I'm ready to help. We're in this together." That simple declaration rekindled a fire in Harold's heart. They worked side by side, bridging generations and expertise to push back against the dehumanizing tide. Public support swelled as stories of the community's resilience and innovation spread through social media and news outlets. Elon Musk's own statement, endorsing the ethical use of technology and praising grassroots efforts like Harold's, added momentum. The final challenge wasn't just about technology, it was about reclaiming humanity in an increasingly automated world. On the day of the corporate launch, Harold stood before a packed hall of supporters and skeptics alike. He spoke not with anger or fear, but with unwavering hope and conviction. "We are not powerless. Our humanity, our stories, our connections, these are the inventions no machine can replicate. Together, we forge a future that honors all of us." The response was overwhelming. The company agreed to collaborate on integrating ethical frameworks and community input into their technology, marking a rare victory for grassroots advocacy. Harold's heart swelled with gratitude and relief, but he knew the work was never truly finished. The final challenge had revealed the fragility and strength of the human spirit, how fear could either paralyze or propel us toward greater connection. As rain gave way to sunlight outside the forge, Harold felt a profound peace settle within him. He had faced the shadows of doubt and emerged stronger, ready for whatever came next. The journey had been long, marked by loss, hope, and transformation. Yet in this moment, Harold realized that the most powerful invention was not a machine, but the resilience and love found in human hearts willing to change, to connect, and to forge a future together. Harold stood at the edge of the town's new community garden, the sun casting long, golden rays across the rows of budding flowers and vegetables. It was a far cry from the lonely days when he had felt invisible, a man adrift in time and space. Now, surrounded by laughter and life, Harold felt a quiet joy settle deep in his chest, a testament to the journey that had reshaped his very soul. The garden was more than just soil and seeds, it was a living symbol of growth, resilience, and the legacy that anyone, at any age, could leave behind. Families gathered here, young and old working side by side, exchanging stories and wisdom as they tended to the earth. Harold's grandchildren chased butterflies nearby, their laughter a sweet soundtrack to a new chapter in the town's story. As he wandered through the rows, Harold's thoughts drifted to the lessons learned, the fears confronted, the connections forged, and the fires ignited by a spark from Elon Musk's warning about a powerful invention. That warning had been the catalyst for Harold's transformation, but it was the people around him and the choices he'd made that truly shaped his path. He recalled a moment from long ago, sitting alone in his dimly lit kitchen, feeling the weight of years pressing down. Back then, hope seemed a distant flicker. Now, it was a blazing flame that illuminated not just his own life, but the lives of many. Harold thought of Tom and Lily, both pursuing their dreams with newfound courage, and of Eleanor and Alex, whose partnership had blossomed into a force for innovation and care in the community. Their successes were intertwined with his own, proof that legacy was not a solitary achievement but a shared tapestry. Later that afternoon, Harold gathered with friends and neighbors in the Future Forge's main hall for a celebration of milestones and memories. The walls were adorned with photos and projects, reminders of how far the town had come from the days of quiet doubt and disconnected lives. Harold stepped to the center of the room, his voice steady yet full of emotion. "I once believed my story was over before it even began. I thought age meant limits and endings. But I learned that it's never too late to change, to dream, to connect. Our legacy isn't just what we leave behind, it's what we build every day, together." Applause filled the room, but Harold's gaze sought the faces of those who had walked the path with him, friends who had become family, mentors, and students alike. He saw the resilience reflected in their eyes and felt the profound truth that legacy was alive, breathing through their shared experiences. That night, as stars twinkled above, Harold sat quietly on his porch, the gentle hum of the town's evening life a soothing balm. He opened the letter from Elon Musk once more, the words echoing in his mind: "True power lies not in invention alone, but in inspiring others to believe in their own potential." Harold smiled, knowing that the journey had been about much more than technology or warnings. It was about the human spirit's capacity to adapt, to hope, and to thrive. The new legacy Harold had forged was one of courage, connection, and purpose. A beacon for those who might feel forgotten or too old to matter. He whispered to the night, "I was never too old. I was just waiting for permission to matter again." And with that, Harold looked ahead, eyes bright with possibility, ready to embrace whatever adventures awaited. The future was unwritten, but he knew now it was theirs to create, together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?